Cryptocurrency, DeFi, NFTs, if that sounds confusing, the BitLab Academy is here to help. We make it simple. Start investing in crypto, learn trading fundamentals and how to make money with NFTs. Join our community today. Crypto for beginners, taught by the pros.
Welcome to Rice TVX. On today's Rice Report, I am joined by special guest David Morgan, the Silver Guru. He is the host and publisher of the Morgan Report, and he is also an author of 3 books, including the Silver Manifesto. Before we get into it, visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX content. You will also find my various social media links and more. You can also find Rice TVX on Odyssey and Library, where I have a full catalog of my videos, post up extra content, and share other appearances. And you can also find Rice TVX on BitChute. To support Rice TVX directly, you can contribute or send tips to PayPal, to Cash App, or cryptocurrencies via my Cointree link in the video description. Everything is appreciated. Another way to support what I do is by joining my Patreon channel, where you will get early access to some of my videos, exclusive content, and more. Get your free half ounce of silver. Take full advantage of my partnership with Money Metals Exchange in 5 easy steps. 1. Visit moneymetals.com. 2. Be a first-time buyer. 3. Purchase a minimum of $100. 4. Use the promo code RICE. 5. Get a free half ounce of silver, and it's an additional way to support the channel. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is David Morgan. He is a macroeconomist. He is the host and publisher of the Morgan Report. He's an author of 3 books, including the Silver Manifesto, a keynote and featured speaker at conferences worldwide. David, I appreciate you coming on. Welcome to the Rice Report. How are you today?
Chris, I am well, and thank you for inviting me. It's a first for me, so I'm very happy to have a discussion with you.
And I'm definitely looking forward to it. Me and you have met privately over a situation that has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about today. And that's kind of what led up to this conversation. And you are definitely an individual that I've been watching for several years because I like to look at the precious metals markets. I like to get a macroeconomic point of view as much as possible from as many different people that I respect. And you're definitely one of those individuals. And I appreciate what you do as a content creator, as the host and publisher of the Morgan Report. So thank you for that.
Most welcome. Thank you. Appreciate the compliment.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I think it's definitely deserved. I mean, you've made appearances on CNBC, Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, MSNBC, and much more. You've also made an appearance in that documentary, The Four Horsemen, which I started rewatching last night. It's such a great documentary. So again, I am looking forward to the conversation. I guess the first thing I would like to ask you is, and this is kind of a tough question, but considering everything that's happening around the world on a macroeconomic level and also a macro political level, where do you feel that we are currently heading?
Well, metaphorically over the cliff. I mean, I think we're in a paradigm shift. I think almost everything right now is coming into question. So, for example, wars. Not that war is never questionable. It's just that there's more people now than even when I grew up as a teenager, when there was lots of protests against the Vietnam War. I think now it's more pervasive throughout the planet that people are like anti-war, or what's good for, all that stuff. And then, of course, the whole money question, which has been basically my focus, my duty, my passion for years, has gotten to the mainstream. And now there's sort of this idea of what is the next step in the monetary system. Is it going to be cryptocurrency? Is it going to be private crypto? Is it going to be central bank digital currency? Are we going to put, gold and silver coins in each other's hands, which I very much doubt. I think there's going to be a blend, but we can talk about that later. So, and then, all the problems. I mean, we're in the energy cliff. I'm convinced of it, which means oil, and that is going to change everything. We've got the food problems, and of course, politically, as I said, war. So it's as the Chinese curses, may you live in interesting times. I mean, we have changes, I think, in any front you want to talk about, politically, anything, even like family life, education. I mean, I can't think of anything out there that's like status quo and hasn't come into question. So very interesting times.
It is. It's and I would even say that would be an understatement. It's very historical times for sure. I mean, considering everything that's been building up, you've had your finger on the economic pulse for quite some time as somebody who was in the gold and silver movement. And then you had cryptocurrencies come about, which I'm definitely wanting to get your thoughts on all the above. But considering what's going on right now, we have it's basically the end of our fiat system. And it looks like you have multiple sides kind of fighting as to where the direction of that's going to go. And I've had some recent change of perspectives recently, but you have the World Economic Forum, IMF, ECB, the European Central Bank, all seemingly working in conjunction, and Europe seems to be a test bed for that. And my recent change in things has been a conversation I had with Tom Luongo. Are you familiar with him?
Heard the name. I'm not that familiar.
Okay. Gold, Goats, and Guns. I'll send you a link to the interview. Interesting perspective. But he was talking about everything that the IMF, World Economic Forum, and ECB are doing, pushing for the fourth industrial revolution, Great Reset agenda, goes against everything that we think about with the Federal Reserve and New York City being the capital of our stock exchange and basically the financial markets of the United States. Have you thought about that perspective, that the IMF and World Economic Forum are trying to kill the dollar while the Fed is doing everything they can to keep it alive?
I have. In fact, I wrote about it in my private work, the paid edition of the Morgan Report. And I go back to Mark Carney, when at the time he was with the Bank of England. And he made 3 speeches, basically, one at the IMF, or one at the UN, I believe the IMF, and Jackson, Wyoming, with the Fed meeting. And what he outlined was consistent. The banking elite, want to, one, maintain control. That's number one. So they're willing to change the system as long as they're in charge of it. And they want a MMT, modern money theory, which most of your viewers will know means you can print money without consequence, which never happened in all of recorded history, not backed by anything, and centralized to the banks. So it would be a fiat system that's electronic, and there'd be no cash at all. That's their goal. Now, I've pushed back on that many times, Chris, saying that I doubt, just because that's what they want doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. And then you've got, free market thinkers, libertarians, anarchists, if you know what the word really means, pushing back and say, look, we the people are the ones. I mean, I just saw, I digressed somewhat, and I want to do a shout out to Truth Stream Media. Aaron and Melissa Dykes, I believe, is their last name. If I butchered that, I apologize. But they did they've done several documentaries, really dug deep on the monetary system. And number 10, I just watched at my leisure time, which is always learning more. And it said, change the money, change the world. And I thought, how profound. It's really true. We, the people, had the money, then we would have the power. If you believe the premise that I always state, that money is power, which means it turns into control. And that's why you can buy politicians. You can have the economic forum that grooms the new leaders that, so many have come from there. So yeah, back to your question, let me elaborate on that. There is, I think, a fight between the dollar's doom via the IMF, Mark Carney, and the elite from the WEF, and what's left of the Federal Reserve. Now, it could be orchestrated where, the masters behind both sides, pulling strings on both puppets, making it look really good. So you've got the, Hegelian dialectic. You got, problem, reaction, and solution is, oh, it's all failed. The stock markets have crashed. Gold's doing this, but we've got a solution. All you have to do is go to your post office, get a retina scan, and get your central bank digital currency. We're going to be so nice. We're going to forgive all your debt from 2000 and pick a number, 2017 on, and we'll give you $1,000, the new Fed coin in your wallet. So step right up. So who knows? But I have thought about it a great deal. And I don't think anyone knows. I have a very strong inkling that the banking elite, the top of the pyramid, seeing eye, knows what they want to implement. Again, will it happen or not remains to be determined. But even they don't know the outcome. I mean, there's a lot of randomness in life. And just because you want a certain outcome doesn't necessarily mean that's good.
No, I agree, because what I'm starting to see with some of this perspective is with what the Federal Reserve is doing is essentially the Great Reset would it would bring everything down to a central bank level and get rid of like your commercial banks, your retail banks, which would include your JP Morgans, your Goldman Sachs, your Citibank. So I never really thought about that group with the Federal Reserve fighting against the de-dollarization, because before Trump's presidency, we've seen the BRICS nation banks working together. China launched a petro yuan, I think it was like 2019. Then recently with Russia with the petro ruble, gold back ruble. So it's really an interesting climate when it comes to everything that's happening. But here stateside, keeping on with the Fed, we have this inflation versus deflation argument. And we have the CPI data coming out. We're recording this on the 28th, and it's going to be released on the 29th of April. But the CPI data comes out on the 11th of May, and we've seen March's numbers at 8.5%, which is extremely high. So I'm curious about where we're going to stand on May 11th. Then we also have the next FOMC meeting on May the 3rd and 4th, where they're talking about a 75 basis point rate hike, which would be like 0.75%. What are your thoughts on the combination of the rate hike and the CPI data that's going to come out and us moving forward on the short term?
Well, it's going to hinder the economy even more, even though their stated intent is to make it better. So they're tightening because there's inflation. And so the way to overcome that is to push interest rates higher. But really, that's a misnomer, because it's not really the interest rate. I mean, if you can borrow money at 10%, but inflation's at 20%, you'll borrow money all day. In fact, in my life, when I just started working in the aircraft industry straight out of school, inflation when officially was like 13.5%, and I could go to the credit union and get an 8% loan. So I did, because it's under the inflation rate. I didn't think 8% was that bad a loan at all when inflation's 13.5. I took that money, went down to the local coin dealer and bought my first gold, right? And I bought it on a loan, on a signature loan. So it's the tightness in the money supply. It's when they fail to give you loans. That's when you have a contraction. But interest rate doesn't necessarily mean a contraction in money supply. So there's, that's something that most people don't think about.
Right.
The other part is the psychology of it, Chris. I mean, let me state this, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I was thinking about, your show, and, statement you don't hear very often is all inflations end in deflation. Ooh, wait a minute. What does that mean? Well, look at any of the recent ones. Look at Zimbabwe, or look at the Weimar Republic, whatever. I mean, the whole cry on the way up in the Weimar Republic is there's not enough money. What do you mean there's not enough money? They're printing those things. They're taking over private printers to print a mark. It's the value was going away. And that's what happens in a severe inflation. And that's what we're experiencing now basically globally, because of course the reserve currency is the dollar. So once the psychology is that something's going to cost more, it's what Ron Mises termed the crack up boom. And when people have the psychology that they've got to spend what they have now for something that's of value to them, they'll do it because they know it's going to cost them more in a week, a month, 2 months out. And once that happens, it's really hard to turn it around. But in both an inflationary depression and a debt liquidating depression or a deflationary depression, it's a depression. So there's a lot of similarities, actually. I mean, there's high unemployment, lots of uncertainty, contraction in goods and services. I mean, a lot of the situation is identical, whether or not you have a debt liquidating or an inflationary depression. In an inflationary depression, the currency fails.
Right, which is like what we've seen in Zimbabwe and Venezuela.
And then a debt liquidating depression, you have the currency doesn't fail. In fact, it becomes worth more and more, which could happen. I mean, meaning, let's say that for a thought experiment, you said 75 basis points. I don't know if it'll be that high, Chris, but it could be. So let's say the Fed comes in at 75 basis points, it goes up, the markets react, all markets sell off, the Fed's tightening, oh my God, and it keeps going. And what that would eventually do is kill the bond market, because as interest rates go up, bond prices go down. So that's a thought experiment. I don't think this would ever happen, but as a thought experiment, if we had Volcker 2 and someone came in and or took the rates up to say 10%, 12%, then the bond market would just be devastated. So that would contract the money supply like you wouldn't believe, which would be deflationary. So that part of it does exist. But again, coming back to, I think, what you discussed at the beginning, it's a shift. And when you asked me my opinion, it was the shift is going to take place from the banker's perspective, that they're going to maintain control. They really don't care how it looks. And they don't care about a deflation, by the way. I think that's an important point to bring up. And of course, you can discuss it and push back on me if you don't agree. But, if you own General Motors, IT&T, Ford, 3M, Dow Chemical, you own an asset. You really don't care what the paper price is. You don't really care about the stock price if you own it. You can just go with the currency de jure. If the currency is a central bank digital currency or fiat or a crypto or whatever, once you have the asset, that's what the wealth is. And now we're just arguing about what's the value, and that's going to be set by the market. So there's a lot to think through on this, and I have for years. And unfortunately, from history, we the people don't stand a real big chance of winning this, but never give up. And certainly there are possibilities. And then there's always like a subset as well, meaning that, pirate coins or whatever, where people just basically opt out and say, you guys can have your way, like one of these dystopian movies where, the rich live at the capital and the rest of us live out in the country somewhere. So lots of things going on.
No, there is. And it's interesting because when we think about things from the Federal Reserve, and the reason I mentioned them so much is because the dollar being the world reserve currency, technically still, if we were to continue the tightening, we would see a crash in the stock market. But if we continue inflating, then it's going to go into a hyperinflation. And we just seen an inversion of the yield curve and another inverted yield curve, which took place in 2019, always signaling a depression. So we're headed for a depression. It's just what type of depression are we headed for? And how are we going to come out of it? So I find it all to be fascinating. And then also to think about, without getting into a lot of details, with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, it's almost as if what Russia is doing is working in parallel with the Federal Reserve against the IMF, the World Economic Forum, and the ECB. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And probably one of the few that would agree with that. I mean, I took a pretty deep dive when this thing started out, and maybe it's wishful thinking, maybe not. I mean, the most, using Occam's razor, you would say, or could say, that Putin's just part of the plan. And it's, as I said earlier in our discussion, both the puppet master has both puppets, Putin and Ukraine. However, there's enough evidence that you just outlined to if you're objective, you have to rethink that, because there is the possibility that there really is a true pushback here. And it's really not a war against Ukraine, although people that hear me say that on your show, most people are probably adults that are deep thinkers. But, you know, the average populace probably would just immediately turn their brain off. But there is a possibility that this is more of a banker's war than anything else, and that there is a fight here for who controls the money. And when you look at what the reserves are in gold for Russia or even China, they have a lot more gold per capita, not China, but Russia, than anywhere else. So there's more gold per person in Russia than there is, as far as I can determine, anywhere else. So the capital base, if you look at gold as being the ultimate money, which it's always been throughout all of history, will it be in the next paradigm? The answer is probably not. Certainly, if you look at what Mark Carney wants, has nothing. They're not even currency. But then again, the war is on. So I actually think it's a very interesting perspective. I'm really glad you brought it up. Why don't you elaborate on what I said? Because I think that could be the subset of the war that no one talks about.
Well, I mean, I would definitely agree. And from my perspective, I mean, I've kind of come up as this libertarian-minded individual who in the Fed, taxation is theft. And I still agree with a lot of those things. But in this sense, for the US dollar, the Federal Reserve is pretty much the only thing keeping it alive. And I find it fascinating that we have these incidents is taking place this on the world stage that basically play out the future for the rest of us, that gets determined by a small few people, and ultimately it turns out bad for us. Now we're at this really pivotal time period right now where we can change that. We have the opportunities to change it before it gets too late. The system itself, I feel like, really should have crashed in 2008. And had they let it naturally crash, we would have had a better recovery. But by doing all the inflating, the quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, infinity, and everything that's taken place between 2020 and now, with all the money printing, it just feels like it's too far. You know, we've gone too far to be able to fix it. And because we've done what we've done with the financial system, it's going to make the recovery that much worse. So I really feel like everything is going to get a lot worse before we even start seeing everything start getting any better. And you mentioned energy. You know, we're seeing a pushback on crude oil. Obviously, I think we need to be utilizing better sources of energy anyways. And then we're also dealing with these talks of coming food shortages. What are your thoughts on the energy and food shortages situation that we're going to be facing here?
Well, nothing's more important for the human experience than energy. And so in the paradigm that we're told, which is, you know, oil runs the energy sector, natural gas, of course, and there's coal and all that, but basically it's hydrocarbons. And without it, we're doomed. And so the whole food system as it presently stands in commercial farming, which is over 90%, is based on petrochemicals, which is based on oil or gas. And so that's key. The idea that there's other ways to, you know, source energy, I am open to those. But you don't hear about them. It's kind of out in the woo-woo world, which is fine with me, but I'm not educated enough to really talk about that. But I don't dismiss it. But it looks like the track is toward oil only or hydrocarbons only. And when those get to the end, which we're approaching rapidly, then you're going to see a lot of contraction in the economy. So I think that's where we're at, Chris, is we're on the bumpy slope. So, you know, as prices go higher, for example, you know, price is supposed to mitigate who gets the item. You know, you get the airline ticket if you're willing to pay $5,000 to fly from LA to Las Vegas. Well, wait a minute, it only cost $50 back 10 years ago, right? And it doesn't cost $5,000 right now. What I'm saying, as energy becomes more and more expensive, And then there'll be a lot of changes in the price structure around, and we're already seeing it with the fertilizer industry, how much fertilizer is costing to put down on ground that's basically sterile. And the only way to get anything to grow on it is use petrochemicals, put it into that depleted soil, and that will give it nourishment that you can grow stuff. So there's a lot involved here. It concerns me, and the paradigm will be rapidly changing. In other words, you'll see a spike in oil, then it'll back off, and then it'll maybe go down and see that it's just all contrived, and then it'll spike again. It's a bumpy road, and it's a bumpy road until the world recognizes that we don't have enough. We don't have enough of this stuff for the current consumption at the current price.
Right. That makes sense. Now, one of the last things I wanted to ask in regards to kind of anything truly fiat related would be right now with the dollar, it looks as if the dollar is strengthening. With a strengthening dollar, I've heard a lot of individuals say that a strong dollar will be the failure of the dollar. Do you agree with that? And if you do, can you explain it?
I can, and maybe you can put up Exter's pyramid if you can find it.
What's it called?
Exter, EXTER pyramid. And I do believe that it will have a very strong dollar until it fails. So in the Exter pyramid idea, John Exter, who worked for the Fed in New York Fed Bank, long deceased, he came up with the idea of liquidity. And in a liquidity squeeze, people go for what they trust. And the world trusts the US dollar. There's a lot of currency overseas that are actually physical pieces of paper that have United States printed on them. And that's because that piece of paper is trusted much more than the local currency. That's what happened in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, Turkey, you name it, Iran. I mean, people trust the US dollar. And that trust will continue until that becomes untrustworthy. So if you look at the pyramid here, you'll see that all these bets on bets on bets, like you said, Chris, 2008, the system really did fail in a way, but they were able to print their way out of it. And so you just got what the big short people know as CDO squares, currency debt obligation that's bet on top of a swap that defaults. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but that's the top of the pyramid there. It's upside down pyramid, very unstable. So all the derivatives, and then you get into the next one down is more liquid and more tangible, non-monetary commodities, private businesses and real estate, which is pretty tangible. Then under that's municipal bonds, corporate bonds. So those that don't know, a corporate bond is the same as a treasury bond that's issued by the United States, backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. workers being able to pay taxes, whereas a corporate bond is a superior position to a stockholder. In a corporate bond structure or in a corporate world or the stock market, if the company fails, I'll just use Coca-Cola. If you own Coca-Cola bonds and someone else owns Coca-Cola stock and the company fails, I'm not saying Coke will fail, but if it did, then the equity holders, the stockholders get zero because what they are participating in is the cash flow or the profitability of the company. But the bondholders get the actual assets. So if the company liquidated, they would get all the Coke machines, all the land, all the buildings, all the trucks, all the bottles, all the bottle caps, all the cans, anything tangible will go to the bondholders, but the equity holders will get nothing. So there is something to think about on a corporate bond. Government bonds, I just outlined, that's based on the fact that we could continue to print money, basically, because that's what happens. So then it gets down to paper money. And this is when things are really untrustworthy. You trust that piece of paper. You trust it's going to buy you a Starbucks, it's going to pay your mortgage, it's going to buy you groceries. Nothing is more thought of as trustworthy than physical hard cash. And that's true. And that's why the dollar will probably soar as things unravel more and more. These derivatives unwind, the real estate starts to crumble because of mortgage rates. Corporate bonds are destroyed. There's so many zombie corporations out there. These are companies that don't make enough cash flow to pay the interest to their bondholders. That's called a zombie corp. There's a lot of them. Look it up on the internet. Do a little research, people. The government, well, if you believe the government is going to be able to pay back that debt, I shouldn't be on this program, or you shouldn't be listening to it. And so now you get down to paper money. One thing I've thought about, and I don't think anyone else has voiced it, and it's just a thought experiment, Chris, but some way to think about it. So think about all of the debt that's out there in, just say, the treasury market, not even a corporate or municipal bond market. So you've got your T-bills that are very short duration, you've got your T-notes, and you've got your long duration bonds. And those are obligations, again, that will never be paid back. But let's say you had to pay them back. Let's say that you did. So all debts get liquidated. It's just how much are they worth. So if you took the base money supply and looked at how much physical currency there is versus how much debt there is and made them match, you would get a very good idea of how overvalued these long dated or short dated treasuries onward are. Because if you had to actually pay out in physical cash, which is all that exists in this thought experiment, not future cash that has to be printed up in the future.
Right.
But today's, is it 10 cents on a dollar, 1 cent on a dollar, 1/100 of a cent on a dollar? I haven't done the arithmetic. I don't know. But it's probably somewhere in the 100th of a cent per dollar. I really don't know the number. But the idea is what I'm trying to point out. To be a huge contraction. So anyway, the run to paper money will occur, but gold will be going up at the same time because gold will be leading the smart money. They will say the dollar is working great, but gold's still at 2,000, 2,500. But the dollar's stronger than any other currency. Yeah, because it's trusted more than any other currency. And then when it's not trusted anymore, that's when the game's over. And that's when people say, oh man, I've got all this cash, but geez, when I go to the grocery store, tuna fish doubled in 6 months. I am not saving any more cash. I am going to buy gold, or I'm going to buy more tuna fish, or whatever. And once you lose the trust in the paper system, then you're going to lose the whole thing. And the run to gold will be full force. Now, that's a pretty good scenario of what I've expected for years. Will it take place? Don't know. It's possible that the banks intervene and they close everything down. There's a bank holiday. Debt forgiveness takes place. They restructure it somehow, some way. They come up with the CBDC we've already talked about. And, Bob's your uncle. We got a new day. It's a new dawn. And it's for everybody's benefit. You don't own anything. We do. But don't worry, you're happy. So who knows?
I don't see a complete debt jubilee, but if we're gonna have to reset, I do see some sort of a debt jubilee of some sorts taking place. I mean, I've even heard of things to the effect of student loans, things that were just really overvalued, overpriced, that would just be forgiven. But I don't think that our credit card debt will be forgiven.
Right. No, I agree with that. I think there'll be some debt restructuring. That's why I use that fancy word.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And you said a lot of really interesting things. And when you brought up the bond market, I don't know if you've noticed this or if it came to your attention, but there's been a real big pushback from the cryptocurrency element on regulation when it comes to stable coins and staking. Because I really feel like the returns that were being offered and still are being offered by some entities we're really having an effect on the international bond market. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, people seek yield, and if it's guaranteed yield, and it's been seasoned for a while. In other words, you put your $10,000 in, and you're earning 1% a month or 2% a month, and there's bigger ones than that in the crypto world, as you know, Chris, and it's starting to pay. Then you're willing to say, you know what, I got 100,000 in the bond market. I'm going to put it into this crypto. I'm getting paid on it. So I do agree with you. I think it is having an effect. I also am concerned, as you know, and I don't want to jump this topic yet, but and we've already had a couple offline discussions brief ones. But on my crypto conspiracy theories, I'm not anti anything. I'm like for peace. I'm not, but the idea is Tether bothers me. Tether is something that as once I dug into the Bitcoin paradigm, it isn't Bitcoin that bothers me so much. It's Tether that does. I just put up something on my Twitter feed. It's an academic read, but for people that really want to know the truth, sometimes it's painful. The truth hurts.
It does
Because
hurt.
you got to work for it. You just can't listen to Chris and David and be all knowing. Sometimes you got to learn it for yourself. Anyway, I'm beating around the bush. I put up Bitcoin Untethered, I think was the name of the article, and it's down there from yesterday. I don't know if you'll find it easily or not, Chris, but
I'm trying to find it.
It's really a good look at what I would say is probably the most objective, truthful look at Tether and what's really going on there. And it's pretty scary once you look at it. So
I'm pretty knowledgeable with the Tether thing, and I do have that in the notes when we come up to the cryptocurrency element, which we're not really far away. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on gold and silver and precious metals in general, because I really feel that 2022 and 2023, you're going to see gold and silver performing very well, as well as I feel commodities, just because we're seeing failing fiat currencies and people going into things that have technically real value. One of the funny things that when you mentioned people having faith in the dollar and losing that would be the crash of the system. It's interesting when you think about, a lot of people don't even realize that we're off of a gold standard, that we're not backed by anything. And if I was to take a monopoly bill and a US dollar of some sort and hold them up and say, I would say the only difference in these two pieces of paper is that you believe one has value over the other, because they're both pretty much the same thing.
exactly. I'm going to just jump in there for a second. This is a hearsay story, but I think it actually took place. It's going around, and my age. But during the Vietnam War, the military put out their script, and that script was used in town to buy stuff. Well, one smart guy decided, it's just script, and these people don't know what it looks like. He used monopoly money and went in and started buying for stuff with the game money. So you're right, exactly right. And there's whether that took place or not, it's an interesting story. I'm pretty convinced it did, and I'm sure he got in trouble for doing that. But losing it's all based on faith. It's a confidence game. That's why we call it a con game, because once you lose confidence, then you can't get it back. And will they transition to another system before we lose total confidence? Again, that's a real question. And I would think anyone at the top levels think about that themselves and wonder the same thing I'm wondering. Can they pull this thing off before everybody realizes the emperor has no clothes? And I'm much better off owning real stuff, land, more self-sufficient, some precious metals. But if you don't mind me taking the lead here, Chris, I think the big shift into the precious metals is going to be the fact that there's really two theories of money. I've got, I forget the name of a yellow book behind me. And it's academic. He makes a real strong case that money is only a legal fiction. Money's whatever humans determine. And we all agree that, this dog biscuit is money, or not even, it's just an NFT is money. I mean, anything. So it's a legal fiction, or it's specie. Those are the two theories of money. So money has value in and of itself, or it doesn't. And I'm not going to take too many sides, although through all of recorded history that we are taught or can learn ourselves, specie wins out every time. And anytime you go on a legal contract basis only, I should say every time, because there's small communities that can do their own, like the Ithaca dollar, and there's communities, and it's a contract, it's a concept, and everyone agrees. And that's fine. I mean, that's sort of the voluntarist libertarian attitude in it. I'm not against it at all. In fact, I'm for that. But on the larger scale, it's always been specie money, meaning gold or silver. And so I think this is what's going to come to the fore, Chris, that instead of buying gold at the pawn shop or the coin dealer or online, or silver in those same places or off of eBay, people are going to move into digital currencies that are backed by gold and silver, maybe platinum, palladium, and that will be the run to gold in a stronger way, because with the advent of the blockchain technology and the availability of the internet, you could be on your phone and you could buy a gram of gold, which is pennies,
Mm-hmm.
and you could divide it, so there's the ability for the masses to come into the precious metals, but it requires a bit of a shift of thinking. Do I want this crypto that has no limit? I know Bitcoin has a limit. I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm talking about hypothetical crypto that's got some good guys behind it. You believe in it. It's got a great name and it's going up in price, but it's unlimited. So what does that mean? Well, if people will think about it, will realize that, how much value can it have in the long run? Whereas a piece of silver or gold has always had value throughout all of recorded human history, and it will most likely continue to have it. So if you have it tied to something, so really I look at it kind of in an upside down way, Chris, and I want your comment on mine. But you look at the ultimate stable coin, it's gold and silver. I mean, an ounce of gold's an ounce of gold anywhere in the universe. An ounce of silver is an ounce of silver anywhere in the universe. That's stability. So that's your stable coin. And what changes around it is what is the crypto that's represented by that word. And the market will figure that out. And the more people that want silver as an adjunct to a stable coin, the more valuable it will become. So I did a speech about a few years ago, and the speech was, what if silver is treated like gold? And what in that, the essence of that speech was, what if silver is considered the reserve asset just like gold is? As much as the banks poo-poo gold and they never talk about it, or very seldom, they all own it. They've been buying it on a net positive basis since 2011. Think about that. For the last decade, central banks keep adding gold to their stockpile.
And they don't tell the normal people to do it. They don't tell normal people to do what they're doing, but they're doing it for a reason.
So back to you. What do you think?
Well, you asked a lot. When it comes to a gold or silver backed or commodity backed cryptocurrency, I don't have a problem with that as long as, and this is the issue, is trust.
Right. Always.
Because when we talk about Tether, same thing. Is it going to be 100% audited, and is it going to be backed one for one? So but now fractionalizing something like gold, where somebody can own a small portion and do that in a digital context with audit and a trusted system, I think could work. Now, on the flip side of that, on the physical, have you seen the gold backed bills that are released?
I think I know what you're talking about. The ones that are actually embedded with gold in the currency itself.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And they change by variation based off the bills are not the same size like we would see, and they're not really technically bills or notes. Yeah. But each piece of paper that represents $1, $5, $10 has a specific amount of gold. So I think it's 1/1000th is the lowest amount that you can get in the $1 bill, which would be about $2 ish. And then with the spot price, is going to be obviously a little bit higher, but something like that being physical. Another thing that I definitely see, because when it comes to value, I don't really feel anything really has value. We just assign the value. It has use case.
Sure.
But use case and value are two different things. Why would any one thing be more valuable than another other than a supply and demand and use case? So where we are headed financially, I think that we're going to be doing something that we did in the time period in between Andrew Jackson and the Federal Reserve, which is local, not exactly the same way, but back then we had local banks issue currencies. I feel that we're going to start seeing local currencies. Miami's introducing Miami coin. I think New York City is going to be having New York coin, creating a local coin for a local economy. So I think that a lot of people, if you go up to somebody and offer them $30 in cash or $25 in cash or whatever the exact cash value of an ounce of silver is, and you offer that in fiat or you offer them an ounce of silver, the majority of people are going to take the dollars.
Absolutely.
So I don't think species would win out in that aspect. It's just perceived value and what we decide that we want to assign it to.
Well, that comes back to the Exter pyramid. I agree with you, but I still would argue that there's a point where that person will take the silver because they've learned that that continues to buy the same amount of goods and services where they need more fiat in order to keep buying that tuna fish. So once again, you take that shift. Now, whether that'll occur or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, just because 0.02% of the financial system is the silver market, I mean, it's so pathetically small that it has no real meaning at this point in time. But to become 0.2% would be a tenfold increase, which means that a few more people wake up and say, "Oh, I don't want the 30, I'll take the silver." But that certainly has not happened. I agree with what you said.
I think here in the
Yeah.
United States, I think losing a world reserve currency status officially and us kind of being on an even playing field with the rest of the world, people will start to wake up to the realizations of what money is versus currency and what maintains a store of wealth and what loses value, because the system has been designed to keep people in debt, and it's not designed for people to save money. And if you explain this to the everyday person and they can finally figure it out, then they're like, whoa, but this is what people have been doing their entire lives. Our parents have been trained to do this, to trust into the system, and it's led us to where we are now. And so, speaking of gold and silver, do you think that this year, 2022, or within going into 2023, we're going to start seeing all-time highs in gold and silver? And do you think that we'll see the end of this paper manipulation on the price?
I don't think we'll see the end of the paper manipulation this year. I do think you'll see a new high in gold in nominal terms. Remember, if gold gets to like 2,200 an ounce, 2,200 in 2022 is not as valuable as 850 was in 1980. So what I'm doing is I'm taking out the lie of inflation for people to think about. Yeah, 2,200 is a bigger number than 850. I think we all know that. But as far as what will $850 buy in 1980 versus what will $2,200 buy in 2022, you'll find out that it doesn't buy as much. But that would be a new nominal high. I mean, the high is somewhere around 2079, I believe. I think this year you'll hit 2122 in gold. Silver won't make a new high because the high nominally has been $50 more or less twice. And in both cases, very temporarily. In 1980, it was there one day. And in 2011, it was there, and it wasn't even 50. It was very close to. It was above 48, 47. I'm looking at a chart for like 3 days, 4 days. But the point is that we will get there again in both metals, if I'm correct, meaning the Exter pyramid. And people say, you know what? I trust these dollars. I trust these dollars. I trust these dollars. Oh, I don't trust these dollars.
Right.
Don't trust these dollars. And that's when the run to gold really starts. Now, I think the run to gold has started because of the amount, not only the banks being net buyers for, over a decade, but we're seeing more shifts from the institutions into gold. And that's kind of the start because the smart money will move in. So someone's in the Teachers Association pension fund and they've got 1% allocation to gold. And then, the portfolio manager sees that, geez, stocks are down, bonds are down. We've got zombie corps in our portfolio, and gold outperformed everything else last time. We're gonna double our gold position. We'll make it 2% of our pension fund. And once that starts to become kind of the mean, that's in the underground, meaning the top level money managers, pension funds, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, and nation states to keep their mouths shut, they're going to go for the gold. And once that happens, where it's obvious on even the mainstream financial channels, and we get the my, gold's making another new high. Geez, it just made a new high 2 months ago. My, what's going on in the gold market? We hit the my's, then people are going to start looking at their dollars and what it buys in gold, and they're going to say, my, maybe I should buy some gold. Oh, my, it's at 3,000 an ounce, and it was only 2,000 last year. Look at silver. Oh, silver's only $60 or $40 or whatever. I'm going to buy silver. And silver's such a tiny market and so much more affordable that I think it'll do what it did in 1980 and overshoot gold on a percentage basis. But I also look for it to probably be a spike again. I just want to be honest here, Chris. And then what will it do? In fiat terms, it could come off like it did in 1980. The biggest question this time is what happens when there's a run to gold, and a serious one, when it's worldwide, not just the United States. It's not just the Saudis, and silver is not just a couple of Saudis and the hunts. When it's everybody everywhere wants to be in precious metals, what happens then? Are you going to want to trade that metal for fiat? Well, if you do, you better have the car and the house picked out, or whatever it is, the foodstuffs or the debt you're going to pay back or whatever, because it could be, I say could not would, be where you sell out at that high paper price only for that paper to turn into the Zimbabwe $1 trillion note, and it means nothing. I'm not saying we're going there. I really do not believe that we're going to have a hyperinflation like that, but I said trillion. I thought, no, wait, it's 100 trillion.
Is that the Zimbabwe note?
100 trillion. Now, the story behind that's pretty interesting. These never got into circulation. I forget the denomination before the 100 trillion. It might have been 1 trillion. I don't remember. But by the time these actually got from the Germany, where they were printed to Zimbabwe, the currency had failed. So that's just what I said a moment ago, that, okay, here's your gold. I give you my gold. Here's all this paper. And now it can't buy me anything.
No, it's
By the way,
fascinating.
just one more quick note here, Chris, and thanks for letting me drone on here a bit. But so I showed that to somebody, a family member, I'll just put it that way. And this family member says, oh my, if only it was real. I said, it is real. So the idea that a big number has value is in the consciousness of most humans, or most Westerners anyway. But those that have lived through hyperinflations know that it's just a piece of paper.
I was trying to pull up this video I can play in the background and let you see something from. You may have seen, because I think, were you at Bitcoin 21?
No, I wasn't at that one.
Last year? Not this year, but last year.
I wasn't at last year.
Okay. There was a dumpster. Now, I didn't realize there was a dumpster until I stumbled upon it, but I kept seeing all these $50 bolivars from Venezuela just like on the ground. So I thought somebody dropped some money. Then I realized I saw them blowing everywhere. So somebody took this trash can full of $50 bolivar notes. This whole entire trash can was worth less than 25 US dollars.
Yeah.
The homeless people in Miami didn't even want this.
Yeah.
And it was like, you see it's like one of those dumpsters that you would see outside of a house that they're doing construction on. It's a huge dumpster that's just full of nothing but $50 bolivars. And it was inside the middle of the conference, and these things were just blowing around everywhere. And it was making one of the most bold statements that I've ever seen about fiat currencies. But we haven't experienced that yet. And when you tell that to people, they find it to be horrifying and interesting, but the reality doesn't sit in that it could happen to them.
Exactly.
In the United States.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I have Swiss bankers that have said, the dollar will never fail. Maybe they're right, but it sure is failing. I mean, if you look at the $1913 to now, the Fed will even tell you it's only worth 2 pennies. So it's had a 98% failure so far. Now we're arguing about how long is that remaining 2 cents going to last.
Right.
And I'm arguing not much longer.
No, it won't. And I try to let people know, like, investing in things like gold and silver are not you trying to play the lottery per se. It's to maintain what you have, so that what you have doesn't lose purchasing power. And there are other things that people can do with smart investments to be able to play lottery tickets per se, which I guess we'll get into the cryptocurrency element. I've been checking out your crypto conspiracy podcast series, and I do enjoy a lot of what you guys have been talking about. There are some things that I disagree with, but I would like to get your, aside from the Tether situation, which we can dive into, what are your overall thoughts beyond the conspiracy stuff of just the technology of what decentralized cryptocurrencies and a blockchain represent?
Well, I was one of the first to learn about Bitcoin because I was subscribing to Robert Prechter at the time, and Prechter is a deflationist, and I'm more of an inflationist. But I said earlier, all inflations end in deflation, and I always looking to challenge my own thinking, right? As Ayn Rand would say, check your premises. So I'm always butting my head against myself as a metaphor to make sure that I'm clearly thinking and trying to take in all sides and come out with a educated opinion on something. So my idea when Bitcoin came around was, holy moly, can we really take the money power away from the banks? I mean, basically, that's why I've lived my whole life, was trying to put power to the people, try to get away from this illicit counterfeiting system that's making everybody a debt slave. Let's be free people. You have free people with free money. And what's free money? It's when it could be gold and silver, and it could be Bitcoin. And so the idea really intrigued me. So I started to do a pretty deep dive, and it was a few years after Bitcoin emerged where I was just getting kind of hounded by, what do you think? What do you think? People trust me. Some do, some don't. Never claim to be perfect, only claim to be human. I'm sure I don't agree with everything on the Crypto Conspiracy series. Just because I have a guest on there doesn't mean I agree with everything they say.
I'm
In
glad
fact,
that you said that, though, because I had to say, I have a disclaimer I have to put on my videos. Just because a guest comes on my show doesn't mean that I agree with what they're saying. And sometimes we have to challenge what we think we know so we can solidify what we actually do know. Sorry
and
for the interruption.
yeah, and I'm pretty quick on my feet, but I'm more of a deep thinker. I mean, sometimes it's like, well, that's not right. And then, well, I'm not going to, just because that guy's an authority or knows more than me doesn't mean I'm going to accept it. But it usually will take me down the rabbit hole and make my own determination. So when the idea of decentralized currency came out, I was like all for it. But when I was asked to write, and I wrote an article called "My Two Bits About Bitcoin," and it's still up on the web. You can type in "2 bits about Bitcoin," David Morgan, it'll pop up somewhere. But I said, well, who cares what I think? If I am who I say I am, and I'm really a free market libertarian voluntarist, then the market will decide. So who gives a rat's what I think? The market will determine. However, having studied the money question, the money powers my entire life, I'm worried. And here's why. The money powers are not going to want to give up their control of the system. And because of that fact, it could be a situation where it's regulated or it's taxed or it's outlawed or it's whatever. I don't say I said outlawed in that article, but the gist of it was, no, the money powers don't want that system. They don't want anyone interfering with their monopoly. They have a monopoly over the money system, and they don't want that taken away. And then I went a step further, and I forget the guy's name. It's in the article at the bottom, and Richard
James
Grove.
Turk?
No, that's at the bottom. It's Richard Grove, I think it was. And I had a chat with him, and he said, let's see, finally, in an effort to research, I think that's it, if you stop there. Finally, in an effort to the topic, I contact Richard Grove of Tragedy and Hope. Richard provided documentation that the National Security Agency was the first to explore this idea. Does this mean that the NSA is ultimately behind Bitcoin? Question mark. I don't know to this day, but it's an interesting thing. And, just pat myself on the back a little bit, Chris, like you, I'm human, I make errors, but I also dig pretty deep. I just don't take everything at face value or so-and-so's an authority and says so. Of course not. But does it give one pause to reflect? Does it not? And I'm still reflecting on that. And of course, from the Crypto Conspiracy series, whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, whatever the basic premise was, I like the foundational statements, I like the white paper, I like the idea, but I think it's been usurped by the banking authorities. And you can find that in Crypto Conspiracy number 14 with Kurt Wuckert that basically verified what John Perez and I had dug up on our own as far as how the system really run at this time. But I love the idea of people having the power, the money power. I'm all for that. It's just, is Bitcoin it or not? I don't know. I think the Bitcoin is probably the precursor to the real possibility that it will happen. In other words, because of some of the technical issues around Bitcoin and the energy thing, there's this huge pushback from the green movement. And and one thing, I have to say this, Chris, because it makes me laugh. I don't laugh at my own jokes very often. But having been in my shoes and lived in my life for as long as I have, there's nothing more emotional than the silver market. I mean, the silver bugs are just the gold bugs on steroids until Bitcoin. And once Bitcoin happens, there's much more emotionalism around Bitcoin than there is around silver. So I finally got the pressure kind of taken off. Because if you want to get an enemy or a friend, it depends on what your thoughts on Bitcoin. Whereas it used to be silver. So actually, there's been some relief. But I think I answered that thoroughly and asked me more. But love the idea. I think it's going to be, looking back in monetary history, it's going to be a seminal event. And where it goes, I don't think will be Bitcoin personally, but I think it'll be a derivative of Bitcoin that will be even better, faster, more adapted, more easy to use, all those things that we want in money. I mean, if silver were truly money, which it is in theory, but there's premiums. I mean, money has no premium. Dollar bill, a piece of paper. I'm not penalized at Starbucks with a spread when I go to buy my coffee. And it should be that way in the metals. It's not, because it's not treated as money. They're treated as commodities. Anyway, back to you.
Well, no, I enjoyed what you had to say. And I would agree as far as what we see with the technologies currently in cryptocurrency. I see a lot more room for advancement, for something to basically kind of take on that blockchain trilemma of decentralization, having the security, and maintaining a network that's going to be infallible and immutable. Now, the NSA, there is an NSA white paper that came out in the late 90s, How to Mint. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So I definitely see the potential possibility that some of these things could have been coming from our governments. But the interesting thing about that, and that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you about crypto and blockchain in general, was a lot of people think of things in a black and white way, good and bad, positive and negative. And these are tools, just like a firearm.
Sure.
So a firearm can be used for good and can be used for bad. When one of your guests that you had on, it was Michael McKibben, who was the inventor of social networking. He's somebody who I would like to interview because he had a lot of really interesting perspectives. But I feel with open source technology, you have people that can go through and audit the code, make sure that the code doesn't have any bugs or discrepancies or any sort of things that would allow for breaking of encryption and things to this effect. So do you think it's possible, based off of some of the things that you've learned, that if it was created, if cryptocurrency, the idea originated as what we know from governments, that it could have been good people in our government trying to release something because they realized what was coming because of the direction that we were heading and that we were continuing to go down?
Great question. And my answer is yes. and I'm going to base it a little bit on personal experience, Chris, if you don't mind. I don't talk about it too much, but I did have a fairly good aircraft career, and I worked on the U-2 program for a while, and the chief test pilot of the U-2 was a 2-star Marine Corps general. And General Weir, I would definitely put in what's currently the parlance of the day, a white hat. And, I'm sort of like, I'm not for war, right? But I'm working in that field and reconnaissance, right? Anyway, the point is that he's the one that pointed out General Stockdale or Admiral Stockdale's In Love and War, which is a book written by an admiral that talked all about the lie of the Vietnam War and the Adolph Tonkin incident and why we are. So there's a lot from my personal experience at very high levels that are good guys and good gals and do want to do the right thing. And so, yeah, it does fit. I get, to go a step further and put on my spiritual woo hat. I don't say woo because it's personal to me. It's a battle of good and evil more than anything else. I mean, we have a monopoly to counterfeit money and you have to be our debt slave, or you're free people that have an honest system that you elect to voluntarily participate in. That's the real, that's the condensed version of our whole discussion. Which way is it going to go and how are you going to vote?
Not necessarily even vote. How are you going to participate?
I meant
no, I get what you're saying, but we can just simply all stop participating. What would happen if the majority of people were to go and withdraw their money from their banks?
Yeah, put it in the cash.
Well, would there even be the cash available?
No, I did
if enough people.
Hunter, and I did the math on it. No,
I think it's like under 20% of the population. I think, and I may be off on my numbers. I haven't done like an exact study on it, but it doesn't seem like it would be that high of a number based off of the money supply, the physical supply versus the digital supply.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know the number either, even though I did the math a while back, but I don't remember the. But your ideas sound correct.
So this article was written in 2014. Right. When did you first learn about crypto? And
well, like I said, Robert Prechter was probably the first one, and it was probably within about 2 or 3 months of Bitcoin being established.
Okay.
I could have gone to Bitcoin and mined some right here on my home computer and come out with 10 Bitcoin just by knowing about it, but I never bothered.
Do you mind me asking, when did you take the dive into and actually buy Bitcoin?
Oh, geez. Probably, I'm trying to be honest here because I bought so little of it. But 2022, probably 2019.
Okay.
I took a schoolboy position in it, and I actually did sell it during the 65,000-ish era. So I did percentage-wise quite well on it. I don't own any right now. I do. I'm an ambassador for the LODE program, which is ag.lode.one, ag.lode.one, which is a cryptocurrency using blockchain technology for gold and silver backed currency. We also have a DAO, which is kind of interesting, decentralized autonomous organization, which I really like. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, Chris, where people are getting a yield off of their crypto. The DAO does that in gold. So we have launched the gold DAO through LODE. LODE is the token, meaning gold, and you can earn interest on it. And then of course the bigger question for the silver bugs, me included, is will there be a silver DAO in the future? And I think the answer is yes, but it hasn't happened.
How do you spell the LODE?
Well, the website is AG, for the symbol for silver, ag.lode, LODE.one. Should come up.
Okay. I was curious because I interviewed, and you probably will remember the guy's name, Bernard von Nothaus.
Yep, Bernard von Otthaus, know him well. He's been to my house a couple times.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's living down in Florida. Are you in Florida?
No, I'm in Spokane, Washington.
Okay, I was thinking you were in
I'm
Washington.
Spokane.
He used to be, I think, in that area, and then Hawaii at one point.
Hawaii. Yeah.
I think his son may have relaunched the Liberty Dollar as a silver-backed cryptocurrency. I was
Well,
going to
yeah,
try to do a little bit more research on it.
definitely there's something there, and I haven't really explored it. One of my members wrote me a nice email about it, and I just kind of have it on the back burner, but I need to reach out to him and find out more. But you're correct.
Cool. So that's kind of one sense when you were talking about a gold or silver-backed cryptocurrency, you're in a way kind of hinting at this LODE project that you're a part of.
Right.
What is your position with the project?
I was on board from the inception. Really liked the idea. Started out as silver only, which of course there's so few people that are silver only. But the way it started was you could not buy a LODE token with fiat, couldn't buy it with Bitcoin or Ethereum, couldn't buy it with anything but silver. And if you wanted to be one of the if you wanted to be one of the participants on reinventing money digitally using honest money, you had to put up silver, and a minimum amount was 100 ounces of silver. So everybody that contributed in the beginning put in 100 ounces, or usually a multiple thereof. I mean, they accept 150 ounces, but there's a 100, 200, 1,000, 2,000, whatever it was. And that's how the capital base was formed to participate in the LODE project. So I was there at a conference in Vancouver, the VRIC, Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, with a lot of people. It ended, and I was asked to sit down and learn about this idea that these people had. Crypto at that time, so it was 4 years ago, so it's not like crypto had been established, but still wasn't where it is now. I mean, 4 years ago, because I like the idea, and it's just been a bit of a struggle, to be honest, to get to where it is now. But it's at a point now where I feel comfortable letting people know about it. I did say from the very beginning, let this thing become fully operational and then participate. You don't have to take the kind of risk that I'm willing to take. Now, a lot of people did, and I'm, again, free market thinker. If you want to do it and you want to accept the risk, a lot of people don't understand the risk in a startup. 99% of startups fail, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're crypto or not. So there's a lot of risk. Anyway, it's come along. There are others there. There's competitors, which is fine. I mean, that's the free market. In the free market, there is competition. And we're kind of behind, in my opinion, meaning we LODE, because I have put a fair amount in there. I contributed a pretty good whack of silver at the beginning. And then as things finally kind of got over the hump and it looked like we were going to see the finish line, I doubled down, Chris, and I threw some more of those weighty things into the pool.
Nice. I'll definitely have to research it and look a little bit more into, what the project's all about. I want to be respectful of your time, so hopefully we can do a follow-up and kind of dive deeper in some of these topics regarding the cryptocurrencies. And like I was mentioning to you before, I would love if you're interested in having me come on for one of the episodes of the Crypto Conspiracy podcast. I would love to be a part of that as well. You mentioned Tether. What are your thoughts, basically, of the problem of Tether in general?
Well, I'm not an authoritarian or a statist by a long shot. On the other hand, I think transparency is important. So, I mean, if we had like open source on Tether and knew that what they were really doing, I would have no issues. But it's rather secretive. It hasn't been audited. It's out of Hong Kong, which is neither good, bad, or different. I love Hong Kong. Been there several times, but I just don't trust it. And I've from an outsider's perspective, without knowing many details, it concerns me that it may not be totally on the up and up. The idea that they could have, and most likely have, bought into the Evergrande paper, and that's backing some of their asset base, concerns me as well. But I can't prove that yet.
I've heard that, though.
Yet. So I am concerned that it's the Federal Reserve in a more secretive manner. In other words, they're able to print up their own, and there's a definite correlation between how much Tether is produced and what the price of Bitcoin is. And so that's a concern, not overly concerned. I think people really need to be aware of both sides of any story. And no one was kind of taking the negative side of the Bitcoin coin. Everything was, positive. And if you had any pushback at all, well, you don't understand Bitcoin. It's FUD. It's FUD, FUD, FUD. They don't understand Bitcoin. Well, I may not understand it to the degree that Satoshi Nakamoto does, but believe you me, I understand things at a pretty good level. And I got the basics of Bitcoin down. And again, it's not Bitcoin that really concerns me nearly as much as Tether concerns me. So my take at this point in time, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I would not be surprised if at the end of the day, Chris, the downfall of Bitcoin will be due to Tether, not Bitcoin itself.
I mean, it's a good perspective, and I'm not saying I disagree with you. I feel that if there was a big problem with Tether, there would be an opportunity for people to exit Tether.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be like just you would wake up overnight and just Tether's gone. And the way that the stablecoin market is going anyways, USDC is already kind of poised to take domination even away from Tether, because it originated through Goldman Sachs through their company Circle, which partnered up with Coinbase. It's 100% audited, backed one for one, dollar for dollar. So and people are gravitating more towards, even someone like myself who doesn't really like legacy financial system like
Right.
1.0, would rather have USDC than Tether, because I know the USDC would be backed 100% one for one. Plus there's some fishy people involved with Tether. But then the flip side to that, and this was something that Kurt Worker mentioned, because he's going to be on my show as well. Me and him have had a lot of private conversations, and we'll get to the Satoshi stuff, but he had mentioned Digital Currency Group, kind of like a venture fund group that helped pretty much finance a lot of what's going on in crypto, including media. The Tether group, I don't find a connection with the Tether people in Digital Currency Group. They're almost at odds with each other. And that's really interesting to think about. In some way, Tether could be like looked at as the unsung heroes for what they're doing by bucking the system the way they're doing it. And I don't know how much you've dug into it and looked at Tether, but Tether, I think it was about, I want to say a year or two ago, it got added to Coinbase.
Mm-hmm.
It had never been added to Coinbase at that time. And USDC, being Coinbase and Circle via Goldman Sachs, was obviously available on Coinbase. It was once Tether was done with all their legal problems, because they had a bunch of cases in New York, all that stuff, they came out and they won, and they were added to Coinbase. So I'm not really sure if we'll see it be a be-all, end-all destruction. CBDCs and regulation, I definitely feel like could come into play with something like that. I mean, when you mentioned in previous episodes of the Crypto Conspiracy podcast talking about tracking and tracing.
Mm-hmm.
And with Bitcoin, you have that pseudo anonymity. Mm-hmm. But obviously with chain analysis, they can find your IP address. You have digital fingerprints, and they can figure out who you are with enough information. Now there are things that you can do to minimize that,
sure,
but it takes people to obviously learn those ins and outs. When it comes to Satoshi Nakamoto, you kind of have a theory on this, and I know the answer, but I want to lead into this. Who do you feel like Satoshi Nakamoto is?
You probably read more into one of my videos than I have, but one, I do not know who it is. I'm not, I don't think it was Craig Wright.
That's who you mentioned?
Yeah, I don't think it's Craig Wright.
Okay.
I just don't. And that's more on a gut feel, just by body language. And kind of responses at some of the seminars that he did. He was being questioned, and it was asked point blank, "Are you Satoshi Nakamoto?" That's an opinion, folks. I do not know is my answer. But this Adam Back or Black, I think it's Back. That guy's
Adam Back.
kind of interesting. So he's kind of in there somewhere. And I had a third, and I'm sorry, Chris, it's my senior moment. I can't remember
That's all right.
who that is. But and I think truly
Hal Finney comes up a lot. I don't know if that was one of your names.
I think it was, yeah. But it could have, I doubt it was one person. It could be. But having, my college days about, doing writing code, and I'm not a coder, I'm not an IT, but still having some familiarity with it, something that much of a breakthrough. It's hard to imagine it could be one person, but it could. I have a hunch that it was more than an entity, and I don't know if we'll ever know. But I think there's a lot of. The other one was Elon Musk.
Okay,
when
I've
I
heard
got
that.
that was the one. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks. It came to my senior mind here. I get information, and I can't always validate it. Like anyone in my position, you're in the same position I am. But I got this email from someone that I trust them that showed a early email with Elon as the sender that talked about Bitcoin in the very beginning. And I think I took a picture of it on my phone to save it for posterity. So that's a very interesting one. This one keeps coming back, circling back to me, where some of the people that I haven't even interviewed because they remain and wish to remain anonymous, that give me information. That name, Elon Musk, has come up more than once. And then who's the other guy from PayPal, the really smart billionaire that's in
I don't know the partners, but I've heard the whole PayPal connection.
Yeah.
Especially because before PayPal, X.com was supposed to be the name, and there's a lot of interesting references to that. I was kind of under the assumption that you thought that Craig Wright was, and I'm
well,
not.
I think Kurt Rucker, sorry if I interrupted you,
Yeah.
is spot on as far as almost everything he said. He believes it's Craig Wright. He's much more familiar with Bitcoin than I am. He's an archivist.
Well, he spent time with Craig. He
Yeah.
knows Craig really well.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and
yeah, so I don't want to discount that too far. It's just sorry if I just think that Elon's in there somewhere.
I'll send you some videos. It's actually there's a guy named Chico Crypto. Well, the channel called Chico Crypto.
Watched him many times,
and he's done some.
Out to him a couple times. Actually,
he's done a couple different videos talking about Elon being Satoshi and explaining about the C++ language. There's a lot of really interesting things that correlate. I'm going to send you an article. It was and I mentioned it at that video that you've seen with me and Rafael Laverde speaking at that shitcoin conference in Miami. Yeah. But someone had wrote an article, and one of their anonymous analysts for Crypto Vigilante, I'd interviewed him, and he wanted to go over this article about this guy said he knew who Satoshi Nakamoto was and came up with this theory of this Canadian cypherpunk named James Donald. Mm-hmm. And he's the first person to reply to Satoshi's white paper.
Oh.
And I think it was like in less than 3 minutes, and it was a very lengthy response. So a lot of people were questioning, one, how could he have had time to look through everything to give that much of an evaluated response? But there's a lot of other interesting things that kind of correlate, including some early projects that he launched called eCheck, and it was
eCash, I think it was.
No, eCheck, because the eCash thing, eCash was something from another cypherpunk. Because I've been studying the cypherpunk, a lot of the Cypherpunk Manifesto, a lot of the early cypherpunks, like Hal Finney was one of those. Adam Back was one of those. As a matter of fact, I'll send you a copy of the picture. I ran into Adam Back at Bitcoin 22.
Okay.
I'm one of those people who feel like Bitcoin is throttled, and he's the CEO of Blockstream, which we'll get into the throttle Bitcoin thing. But I was wearing a shirt that says, "I am Satoshi." And I was talking to him about my reservations about Blockstream and asking him if he would be open to doing an interview. He said yes, but so far I haven't gotten a response back from him, but I'm trying to make that interview happen because that leads into, you've mentioned Bitcoin being limited. What do you mean by Bitcoin being limited?
Well, not talking on the technical side. I'll leave that alone as far as how many transactions it can do and how much energy it takes and all that. I'm talking about functionality and the what I believe to be true. I think we've built a strong case that has pretty much been usurped by the MasterCard folks, and Kurt Wuckert backed us up on that. That anytime you have the money printers owning the vast majority of the currency, whether it's a Bitcoin or whether it's fiat, they have the power. So it looks to me pretty substantive evidence that whatever the intent was, and I believe the intent per the white paper, it's again been usurped by the powers that be, and that upsets me because it's free markets for free people, honest money for honest people. It's been a hard money, honest money advocate from the time I understood what the bankers did to us. I don't think we live free. I think we are debt slaves. If anyone's interested, you can put it up or not, Chris. But one of my most popular videos is Escape the Matrix, where I play Morpheus in that encounter. And I actually had an actor. It was Robert Beretta's son that sat across from me. He was a Screen Actor Guild actor. And I basically play Morpheus and say, all that exists is truth or resistance to it. I mean, all I'm offering you is the truth. Do you want this piece of paper or do you want this silver coin?
I've never seen this. That's cool that you did that.
Yeah. And
I like
so
that.
he comes in and, believe me, this was a professionally done studio, people. And I'm there, had more hair, and it was dark back in those days. But yeah, so I'm fiddling with the coin, and then I'm talking to him, of course, and I'm using the lines right from the Matrix. There's something wrong with the world, but you don't know what it is, but it's bothered you. It's bothered you your entire life. And he agrees. Why are you here? Here because you feel something. So we go through that, and then I said, the wool's been pulled over your eyes from the truth. And he's like, what truth? What are you talking about? Because I lean into him. I said that you were born a slave. You were born like everyone else into bondage. And he's looking at me, what? You're born a debt slave. You will live a debt slave and you will die a debt slave. And then I show him the Zimbabwe. Take the blue paper, remember it was blue or red, and go back to sleep and believe whatever you want to believe. Or take the silver coin and let the light of truth shine down the rabbit hole just as far as you're willing to go.
That is awesome, man. I'm definitely going to have to link this at the bottom of the video in the video description so people can check it out.
It's funny. It would cost me a small fortune. I mean, not that I couldn't afford it, but it was one of those gulps to do it. And I got a discount price. I mean, the guy that set it all up is a Hollywood person. I won't say his name for anonymity reasons, but he got the leather back chairs. He got everything for me, got the actor, got the cameraman. But I think that took like 4 hours for whatever that 4 minutes is. Wow. I never worked so hard in front of a camera in my life because I'm not an actor. Never pretended to be one. But so my intent was to get more people in the millennial group, my kids' age, right? So after I got it made, got it rendered, and they sent it to me, I asked my youngest daughter at the time, come in and watch this. And I said, as soon as you know what this is, I want you to tell me what it is. So I hit, start button. I'd say 4 seconds in, she goes, Matrix. She knew.
That's good.
Right away. And what was so hokey, I got to say this just for fun purposes, because we talked some pretty heavy subjects. So the last scene that we filmed was the first scene in this little clip. And I'm at the window and they're shining lights on this guy that's holding up a piece of cardboard with tin foil on it going like this. And I'm looking out the window trying not to laugh. And that was the lightning, right? And they put the sound in there. It's freshly done. And I'm trying not to laugh, and I'm thinking, this is so hokey. But when you watch the video, it's perfect. Looks like you muted yourself.
I did. I do that periodically, and sometimes I forget I do that, and then I end up doing what I just did.
Okay.
That I really like the video. So again,
Nice.
I'll have it linked down below. I think it's a really cool idea. And when it comes to Bitcoin being limited, this is the way I look at it. And I do see Digital Currency Group. I know that they're a big funder of Blockstream. Blockstream CEO is Adam Back. He was listed in the Bitcoin white paper. I think eCash was his, if I'm not mistaken. There was DigiCash. That was the first digital currency beyond the IMF's SDR that came out in the 90s from David Chaum, who's considered to be the godfather of cryptography, who I've had scheduled to interview twice, but he's had to cancel due to health issues. And I'm going to be going to Texas next month, and I'm hoping to interview him there because he's getting a little bit older, and I'd like to try to memorialize his accomplishments as the godfather of cryptography.
Sure.
But so there's no Bitcoin company, there's no CEO of Bitcoin, there's no foundation. So the people that work on coding to improve Bitcoin do it for free, with the incentivization that their Bitcoin would be worth more with the improvements of the blockchain. Well, on the flip side, you have a company like Blockstream that will hire the Bitcoin developers and pay them to work on fixing solutions that are side chain or not on chain related, so that they can profit off of those solutions versus just improving Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what led into the whole hash wars with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, BSV, like what that Kurt talked about.
Right.
So just to kind of give you a little perspective on that. And the last real question I have in regards to crypto and the interview is, and then I want you to, if you don't mind, share what you guys are doing there with the Morgan report, with everything you got going on. But what are your overall thoughts on privacy coins like Monero, for example, or Pirate Coin, in comparison to what we look at with the pseudo anonymity of Bitcoin, and then the coming CBDCs, which will be a closed system that gives them complete information on everything that you do with tracking and tracing and all of your spending habits and what you buy, etc. How do you feel about Monero and Pirate Coin and other private coins?
I really like Monero. I like the concept. It's, for me personally, remember, I'm past 65. I found it a bit cumbersome. I don't own any. I wanted to, but it seemed like it was even more difficult for me than someone like you, Chris. I'm sure can just zip in and out. But I am absolutely for anonymity and privacy. I think the people need the power. Those are the two that really have it, from my perspective. Everything else has got, for lack of a better term, a weak link involved. I forget the name and I'll butcher, but Andropoulos, something like that.
Andreas Antonopoulos.
Yes, and he spoke right in front of me, and I was like literally 3 feet. And because I've been involved with the concept for a long time, and he spoke at one of the Acapulco conferences, kind of to a private group, and even he admitted way back when that it wasn't really anonymous. I mean, if you wanted to dig deep enough, hard enough, far enough, you could basically route out just about anyone. I mean, those are my words, but that's what he was implying. And I said, finally, because that's how I saw it. But, again, I don't write code, but, I've learned enough, asked enough of the right questions. And okay. And he's very honest about it. But I'm much more bullish than me. And, had I bought, $10,000 worth of Bitcoin after I listened to him speak, I probably.
Now, I don't think he took even his, I don't even think he took his own advice, though. I don't think he made a lot of early investments. There was a time period around 2018, maybe, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but somebody was encouraging donations to Andreas. And a lot of people in the Bitcoin community came and donated but I don't think he at that point really truly had the money or resources to invest. As a crazy story, because he's been on my show a couple times. I actually just reached out to him to get him back on, and I do love his perspectives. It's just he's a little limited in his views because he's pretty much Bitcoin and Ethereum only. It was Bitcoin for the longest time, and now with Ethereum. And I think that there's room for other blockchains. I mean, obviously not the amount of blockchains that I think and cryptocurrency that we have existing today, but I definitely feel like choice and multiple blockchains and having a cross-chain feature, I think, would be a lot more beneficial, where it gives people choice. Choice is definitely one of those things that I think is one of the benefits of freedom.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have choice, we don't have freedom, and that's just the unfortunate thing. So, well, David, I've really thoroughly enjoyed this, man. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully we can do this again. I'd love to, invite you back on the channel and have you back on and dig a little bit deeper into some of these areas of cryptocurrency that we weren't able to cover today. But before we do wrap up, do you mind sharing what it is that you do at the Morgan Report for people who might be unfamiliar with you or want to utilize what you're doing over there?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. And I enjoyed it thoroughly as well. So I do a lot for the public domain. A lot of these interviews. I don't write in the public square very much anymore because it seems everything's gone to video. And around 2011, I really pretty much went to all video or audio. I do write occasionally and put it up on the website. So there's two parts of the website. There's a free site, which is the landing page, and you can just get on our free email list. We've got about 50,000 on that. And then if you're inclined to read my private work, the financial newsletter that I write and have for 22, 23 years, just go to the subscribe button and you can watch the video and the sales letter. It's focused on the macro picture, like you talked about at the beginning, but besides the editorial, we pick resource stocks. I'm pretty strong on the equity side. I do some futures, but I advocate hardly anyone follow me on that. It's look over my shoulder. You can watch what I'm doing. I'll put up a chart and show you where I'm getting in or out. But primarily, it's an investing newsletter based on resources. We've been in everything. Some people think it's silver only. It's not. It is. We've been the first on rare earth elements. We were leading on that. We were probably the first on cobalt. We were early on lithium. I got out of lithium too early, but the way it crashed, not now, but the first round, we kept our profits. But right now, it's pretty much gold, silver, uranium, and a couple asymmetric trades. I'm publishing this weekend, Chris, and this is a shameless plug, but you asked. I would say that the editorial that is in this issue, which will be the May issue of the Morgan Report for 2022, if you are a serious investor, let me emphasize the word serious investor in the resource sector, particularly in gold and silver, mining equities. So very specific. If you're a real serious investor in gold and silver mining equities, pretty much owe it to yourself to buy the report, because I'm going through in this report in detail why there's only a certain class of gold and silver stocks that are really worth having in a high inflationary environment. And I've been asked that question by my readers. I try to serve them to the maximum capabilities of our team. It's me and about 5 others. It's not just me alone. We do the mining trips, we visit them, we write them up, we film them, we interview the geologists, and on it goes. So very passionate about honest money for honest people, redoing the system to where we have some control and more freedom, and make a living by getting paid to write a financial newsletter by people that want to purchase it from me. That's basically it.
I love it. Well, I will definitely have links for the morganreport.com, for your Twitter account, for your YouTube channel, and I'll also include a link for that Matrix video as well in the video description. So I encourage everybody to check all that out. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to add to today's conversation?
I do. It popped in. I was going to run on. And the final thought is, I think it was about 9 years ago. there's a video I made. I think it's called Silver is the Achilles heel of the entire financial system. It's a pretty long title, but it starts off Silver is the Achilles heel, and I think it's of the entire financial system. In that video, I did a few shout outs because, it was kind of lonely in the beginning. It was me and a guy named Ted Butler primarily that were writing anything about silver when the internet was getting mass adoption, where everybody was trying to get a computer, get a browser. I mean, I started out with Netscape, but actually I started before that with the BBS, and then Netscape was the first browser I used. But regardless,
I remember BBSs. That was in my high school days. It was like early 90s. A friend of mine was doing BBSs.
You bet. So I made this video and I shouted out to the guy from Silver Doctors and a few other people, and he did a video about Bernanke seeing a silver dollar, which is being the demise of the system. And so I went through the whole thing, basically giving credit to people who I should give credit to. And then in the last half of the video, I say, and this is what I wanted, you say, what's the last thing you want to say? And here it is. And I said it 9 years ago. I said, it does not matter how much gold or silver you've accumulated. If you can't go where you want to go, say what you want to say, buy what you want to buy, be friends with whomever you wish to be. If you've lost your freedom, you've lost everything. So it doesn't matter how much physical, real money wealth you've accumulated. If you've lost your freedom, you've lost it all. And that was the second half of that video. And that's the most important message I can give today. And the reason that I'm such an advocate of gold and silver isn't because they're shiny, isn't because they're precious. It's because through all of history, we know that when we have liberty, it's with free money. In other words, there's a direct correlation between honest money and what happens in society. The Roman Empire is a perfect example. When they started off the denarius, which is in the movie, The Four Horsemen, and people had real freedom. The senators really did represent the people. And then, of course, at the end, they debased the currency, where basically the silver was a token, and it was a copper coin washed in silver, very small plating. And the government was out to loot as much as they can, similar to today. So the story doesn't really change that much. It just goes in cycles again and again and again. Thank you for that. It's very important for me to let people know that there's a lot more important things in the world than money or honest money. Freedom's the most important.
I couldn't agree with you anymore, my friend. And that's one of the reasons why I was just looking forward to the conversation. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, one of the reasons why because I didn't really care about money, and cryptocurrency started giving me a different look on things. And I didn't get involved with this for monetary gain, got into it for the freedom, and ultimately for the idea of just ending this idea that we even need to have something like money.
Yeah. If I could just say one more thing.
Yeah.
In the Silver Manifesto, the last chapter, I forget the title, and I wrote it, but I think
which is one of your books. Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of your books.
Where do we go from here? The last chapter has to do with the money question, because I'm open. I said, do we even need to have money in society? And what's wrong with the system? And I said, I have more questions than I have answers. I'm not saying silver is the answer. I think silver and gold are a transition. But
No,
I'm very open about that because I'm pretty transparent. I'm a private person in some ways, but in my field of endeavor, I'm pretty transparent. And I said, look, I don't know. Here's the kind of thoughts I've had about where we're going. Of course, back then when I wrote that book, I don't remember if cryptos had been around. If they were just an inkling, just starting. I think I wrote it really before even Bitcoin, but I still had the idea that where do we go? We need something better than we have. This is out of control. And again, silver and gold aren't necessarily the answer, but they are a placeholder.
The book was published.
Your wealth.
It was published January. Sorry for interrupting you. January 27th, 2015.
Okay, so Bitcoin had been around for a while.
Yeah, just looking it up super quick. Well, yeah, man, I will have, like I said, I will have links for your YouTube channel, for your website, for your Twitter, and also those 2 particular videos that you had mentioned throughout the videos. So people can check those out as well. If you could bear with me 1 second, just going to wrap up the recording. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for tuning in. This happens to be your first time ever watching any of my videos. I do encourage you to check out and explore my channel. Make sure you're subscribed, and I will leave you with this. Be blessed, be the change, practice change.